There are moments in life when everything changes, when the carefully constructed reality you inhabit shatters into a million pieces, revealing a truth far more astonishing, far more brutal than anyone could have predicted. You might think you know what's coming. You might believe you understand the dynamics of a family, the true measure of a man, or the delicate dance of wealth and social standing. But what if all of it was a meticulously crafted illusion, upheld for years by a single quiet individual? What if the most unassuming person in the room held the key to an unimaginable fortune, a devastating secret, and a retribution that would redefine an entire family's legacy? On a crisp autumn evening, at a wedding that epitomized old money and glittering ambition, I sat in the shadows at table 12, watching my only daughter Caroline weave a tapestry of lies. She stood radiant in a $15,000 gown, her voice resonating across the opulent ballroom, telling 180 of Greenwich's elite that I was nothing more than a pathetic failure, a man too broke to save her mother, a husband whose wife died ashamed of him. Every word was a calculated dagger, twisting the knife into 8 years of my self-imposed silence. The Sterlings, her new wealthy in-laws, nodded with self-satisfied smirks, their hedge fund friends exchanging knowing glances. No one, not a single soul, spared a glance for the broken widower in the corner. They assumed they knew my story, my worth, my place. They were spectacularly wrong. And in that precise moment, as I carefully set down my water glass, a monumental shift was about to occur. Caroline, my own flesh and blood, had no idea that I held the undisputed deed to $33 million, securely nestled in my Chase account. She was about to discover, in the most public and devastating way imaginable, why you absolutely, unequivocally, should never ever humiliate the quiet man in the corner. This isn't just a story, it's a testament to the explosive power of withheld truth, and you won't want to miss a single shocking detail of what happened next. The architect of a silent fortune. My name is Matt Thompson, and I am 62 years old. For 3 decades, I was deeply embedded in the secretive world of military contracting, specializing in the design and implementation of highly classified defense systems. This wasn't just a job. It was a calling that paid exceptionally well, far beyond what most people could ever imagine, but it came with stringent requirements. The most important of these was absolute discretion about my wealth, a mandate for top-secret clearance that extended to every aspect of my life, even my family. My late wife, Margaret, and I deliberately chose to raise our daughter, Caroline, in a modest 3-bedroom house in Stamford, Connecticut. We drove sensible, used cars, shopped at Target for everyday necessities, and our vacations were typically simple trips to the Jersey Shore, rather than lavish European tours. This wasn't because we couldn't afford a more extravagant lifestyle. Quite the opposite. Margaret firmly believed in instilling in Caroline a profound appreciation for the true value of money and the importance of character. "Don't spoil Caroline with wealth," she would always advise, her voice gentle but firm. "Let her build character first. Let her understand what it means to earn her way." Margaret herself was a shining example of this philosophy. She dedicated 28 years of her life as a kindergarten teacher at the same elementary school, earning a respectable but humble $45,000 a year. She could have retired at any point after my defense contracts began generating truly substantial income, but she adored those children. Teaching, she always said, kept her grounded, connected to the simple joys and realities of life. Caroline, throughout her formative years, remained completely oblivious to the vast sums of money flowing into our accounts. To her, I was simply Dad, a man who worked on abstract computer stuff for the government. Mom was just a teacher. We were, in her eyes, a quintessential middle-class family, perhaps even lower middle class when economic times felt particularly tight. It was a carefully constructed reality, built on love and a shared vision for our daughter's future, a foundation that would soon be tested beyond measure. A shadow falls. Then, in the year 2014, the serene landscape of our lives was irrevocably altered. Margaret, during what should have been a routine self-examination, discovered a lump in her breast. The subsequent diagnosis was devastating: stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. The oncologist delivered the grim prognosis with clinical detachment, offering a window of perhaps 18 months if we adhered strictly to standard treatment protocols. But maybe 18 months was a phrase I simply refused to accept, a concession I would not make. My resolve hardened instantly. I would fight for her, with every resource at my disposal. Without hesitation, I began liquidating everything. I sold my substantial shares in 3 defense startups that I had personally helped build from the ground up. I cashed out my Pentagon consulting retainer, a contract alone worth $2.3 million annually. I burned through every single contact I had cultivated over decades in military medicine and cutting-edge research. We pursued experimental immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins, each cycle costing an eye-watering $180,000. We endured proton beam radiation sessions at Mass General at $95,000 per session. We flew to Switzerland for clinical trials, where even the initial consultation alone commanded a staggering $40,000. Caroline observed all of this with a mixture of fear and growing concern. She watched me meticulously write check after check, saw the stark, undeniable evidence of massive withdrawals from our savings accounts. She witnessed me sell the house we had called home for 15 years, a place filled with cherished memories, all to finance treatments that health insurance stubbornly refused to cover. Dad's spending everything trying to save Mom, she confided to her friends, a statement that, in its surface truth, couldn't have been more accurate. The sheer volume of medical bills, which ultimately totaled $2.1 million over a grueling 24 months, entirely drained our visible accounts, leaving them seemingly barren. The hidden currents of fortune. What Caroline couldn't see, what she was never meant to see, was the parallel flow of an even greater tide of money surging back into my hidden financial channels. Just 3 months after Margaret's initial diagnosis, the Pentagon, in a move of extreme confidentiality, awarded me the largest single contractor cyber defense project in the entire history of the military. This was a colossal undertaking, valued at a staggering $47.5 million spread over 5 years. Its very existence and all its intricate details completely classified. Not even my closest family members, certainly not Caroline, were permitted to know its true scope. 6 months after that, one of my defense startups, the very same one whose shares I had ostensibly sold, went public in a spectacular IPO. My original stake, carefully reconfigured, was converted into a fresh tranche of shares that I was legally prohibited from touching until after the post-IPO lockup period expired. When that stock finally hit the market, those shares alone were valued at an astonishing $31.2 million. A year later, Northrop Grumman acquired another company for which I had designed critical security protocols. My consulting agreement with them included back-end royalties that automatically triggered upon reaching specific revenue milestones. That single check alone was for a massive $18.7 million. By the time Margaret entered hospice care in late 2015, my personal wealth had swelled to levels far beyond anything Margaret and I had ever even dared to dream of. Yet, I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell Caroline. The Pentagon contracts were absolute, demanding complete financial discretion until the projects officially concluded in 2019. Margaret passed away peacefully on January 15th, 2016. Caroline was 25 years old at the time, still grappling with the raw pain of loss. At the funeral, she stood bravely, her voice thick with emotion, and spoke of how her father had spent absolutely everything trying to save her mother, how we had lost our cherished home and our entire life savings in the valiant but ultimately futile battle. But at least Mom knew how much Dad loved her, she concluded, her words echoing through the solemn room. I allowed her to believe it. For 8 long, silent years, I let Caroline remain convinced that we were utterly broke, that her father was a failure, a man who, despite sacrificing every penny he supposedly possessed, couldn't save her mother. A promise kept. A character questioned following Margaret's death, Caroline, believing herself to be from a financially ruined family, took a marketing job earning a respectable $65,000 a year. She moved into a small studio apartment in Manhattan, a place that consumed $2,800 of her monthly income. She started dating men from the lucrative worlds of finance and consulting, men who, in her perception, made real money. All the while, I continued to live out the charade of being broke. I purchased a small condo in Stamford for $180,000 cash, yet I told Caroline I was merely renting it. I drove my faithful 2012 Honda Civic, a car I'd owned for years, a subtle symbol of my supposed frugality. I continued to shop at the same Target, ate at the same local diners, maintaining the illusion of financial hardship. But beneath this careful facade, a different reality was at play. Every month, mysteriously, Caroline's student loan balances would shrink. Her credit card payments would somehow clear themselves. When she needed a security deposit for a more desirable apartment, an anonymous cashier's check would, without fail, appear in her mailbox. She never once questioned these fortunate coincidences, attributing them perhaps to luck or a guardian angel, never suspecting the quiet man behind the curtain. The sterling deception. Then, in 2019, a new chapter began for Caroline. She started dating Reginald Sterling, a suave hedge fund analyst from a family whose immense fortune had been meticulously accumulated through railroad investments over 3 generations. The Sterlings embodied old money. They owned an imposing 12-bedroom estate in Greenwich, drove matching Range Rovers, and spent their summers in the exclusive Hamptons. Caroline was, to put it mildly, in heaven. She finally believed she was dating someone of real class, someone who fit her aspirational vision of success. The Sterlings, however, viewed me with thinly veiled disdain from the very beginning. At family dinners, their condescending comments about Caroline's working-class background were frequent, always accompanied by remarks about how fortunate she was to be joining their illustrious family. I recall one particularly galling Christmas party where Reginald's father, Whitman Sterling Jr., approached me. He patronizingly informed me that he admired how I'd done my best with limited resources. I simply smiled, a tight, controlled expression, and thanked him for his understanding, all the while remembering the astonishing truth that he and Caroline knew nothing about. The profound irony of his words was almost unbearable, a silent testament to the monumental deception I had maintained. But what Caroline was truly oblivious to were the conversations I had shared with her mother in those final weeks. The brutally honest assessments Margaret had delivered about our daughter's character, made all the more candid by the morphine that eased her pain. Caroline was utterly unaware that she was about to discover in the most catastrophic way possible why you should never, ever assume the quiet person in the corner doesn't possess a nuclear option. The wedding day. The wedding day itself was, for Caroline, the absolute realization of her most extravagant dreams. It unfolded at the Ashworth Estate Country Club in Greenwich, a venue so exclusive that merely booking it for a single day commanded a staggering $85,000. 180 guests, each one impeccably dressed in designer attire, moved through the opulent spaces, sipping champagne that retailed at $200 a bottle. I, in stark contrast, wore my best suit, a $200 navy blue number from Men's Warehouse that had faithfully served me for 6 years. Caroline had explicitly asked me not to embarrass her by attempting to rent something expensive, a request I, with my hidden millions, had graciously honored. The ceremony was, by all accounts, beautiful. Caroline looked utterly radiant in her $15,000 Vera Wang gown, every inch the blushing bride. Reginald, in his custom $4,000 tuxedo, appeared as if he had stepped directly out of a Ralph Lauren catalog. I walked her down the aisle, my arm linked with hers, and gave her away to the man she professed to love. I even managed a proud smile when the photographer instructed me to look proud of your daughter. And I was proud, genuinely so, right up until the dinner service commenced and the calculated cruelty began to unfold. The first betrayal. The Sterlings, with deliberate intent, had seated me at table 12, tucked away in the very back corner of the grand reception hall, uncomfortably close to the noisy kitchen doors. My table mates were an eclectic mix. Reginald's elderly great-aunt, who was almost entirely deaf in one ear, and a couple of distant cousins who clearly understood they had drawn the shortest straw in the seating lottery. Caroline's table, by contrast, commanded the absolute center stage, a lavish head table adorned with $500 worth of pristine white orchids. She sat beaming between Reginald and his father, laughing heartily at their jokes, effortlessly blending into their exclusive crowd. During the cocktail hour, I had been an unwitting eavesdropper to snippets of conversation. Reginald's Princeton buddies casually discussed their sprawling summer houses in Martha's Vineyard. Hedge fund managers compared their gleaming Ferrari collections. Investment bankers grumbled about their children's $60,000 a year private school tuitions. One of Reginald's groomsmen, a particularly smug young man, leaned over to Caroline and asked how she had escaped her circumstances. She had laughed, a light, dismissive sound, and replied, "Good genes and better taste, I guess," completely unaware of the bitter irony in her words. But the true performance, the real spectacle, began when Caroline gracefully rose to deliver her speech. She tapped her champagne flute with a delicate silver knife, and the room, as if on cue, fell into an expectant hush. 180 pairs of eyes turned to gaze upon the beautiful bride, resplendent in her perfect dress. "Good evening, everyone," Caroline began, her voice clear and confident, carrying effortlessly across the vast room. "I want to thank you all for being here on the most important day of my life." Polite applause rippled through the room, accompanied by warm smiles, the standard pleasant opening for any wedding speech. "You know, growing up, I never thought I'd end up somewhere like this," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the opulent room, married to an amazing man from such an accomplished family, surrounded by all of you incredible people. More applause. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, a quiet observer. "I have to be honest with you all," she said, her tone shifting, becoming more serious. "My childhood wasn't easy. My father," and here she paused, her eyes like daggers, finding me in my secluded corner. "My father tried his best, but he never really amounted to anything." A palpable silence descended, the room growing perceptibly quieter. A few uncomfortable glances flickered towards my table. "After my mother died," Caroline pressed on, her voice imbued with a feigned sadness, "he became, well, let's just say the grief didn't bring out his best qualities. He kind of gave up on life, on success, on trying to provide for his family." I carefully set my water glass down, the faint clink echoing in my ears, and folded my hands calmly in my lap, my expression impassive. "I'm not proud to say this," she declared, her gaze briefly settling on me again, "but there were times I was embarrassed by his limitations, his working-class background, the way he settled for mediocrity instead of pushing himself to be better." Reginald's father, Whitman Sterling Jr., nodded approvingly, a smug smirk spreading across his face. Several Sterling family members exchanged knowing glances, a silent confirmation of their shared disdain. "I used to lie awake at night wondering what my mother would think if she could see how far he'd fallen after she died," Caroline continued, her voice filled with a manufactured pathos, whether she'd be ashamed of the man she married. That's when a chilling, Arctic cold settled deep within my chest. It became undeniably clear. Caroline was openly, shamelessly weaponizing Margaret's sacred memory against me, right here, in front of 180 strangers and acquaintances. "But thankfully I found Reginald," she resumed, a beatific smile gracing her lips. "And through him, I found this family. A family that showed me what real success looks like, what it means to have standards, to achieve something meaningful with your life." She raised her glass, not to me, but pointedly toward the Sterling family table, a gesture of allegiance. "Whitman, Patricia, thank you for welcoming me into your family, for showing me that it's possible to rise above your circumstances, for proving that breeding and class aren't accidents of birth, but choices you make every day." Half the room, specifically the Sterling contingent and their allies, erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. "So, here's to new beginnings," Caroline announced, her voice soaring, to leaving the past behind, to finally having a father figure who actually accomplished something with his life. She smiled directly at Whitman Sterling Jr., who beamed back at her, looking as if she had just handed him a coveted trophy. "And here's to my real father," she added, her tone dripping with saccharine condescension. "Sitting over there at table 12, who did his best with what he had, even if it wasn't very much." A few people in the room actually chuckled. They laughed. They laughed at the pathetic old man in the cheap suit who couldn't even afford a decent table at his own daughter's wedding. Caroline raised her glass one final time, her eyes disturbingly finding mine. "To everyone who helped me become the woman I am today, and to those who showed me exactly what I didn't want to become. The room erupted in a fresh wave of applause. Caroline hugged Reginald, kissed her new father-in-law on the cheek, basking in the glow of approval from 180 people who now believed they understood the exact kind of failure who had raised her. I remained seated for a full 30 seconds, listening to the applause gradually die down, watching my daughter radiate pride at having publicly humiliated the man who had loved and supported her, albeit silently, for her entire life. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I reached into my jacket pocket. Caroline had no idea what I was carrying with me, what I had been safeguarding for 8 long years, patiently awaiting this precise, devastating moment to unleash the full, unvarnished truth about everything. She was about to discover that some lessons, unlike others, come with an astronomical price tag: the nuclear option. What I pulled from my jacket pocket wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was something far more dangerous, far more potent: my late wife's iPhone. The very same rose gold iPhone 7 Plus that Margaret had clutched during her final fading weeks in hospice. I had kept that phone meticulously charged for 8 years, unable to bring myself to delete the last voice memo she had recorded, a mere 3 days before her passing. I had listened to it exactly once, the night after her funeral, its raw agony too profound to bear again, until this very night. This, I realized, was the moment Margaret had foreseen. I excused myself from table 12, moving with an unhurried grace that belied the storm raging within. I walked past the elaborate dessert station, past the glittering bar where Reginald's groomsmen were boisterously ordering $50 shots of Macallan, past the photo booth where Caroline was joyfully posing with her new illustrious family. I found a quiet, secluded corner near the coat check, a temporary sanctuary from the cacophony of celebration. With a steady hand, I pressed play. Margaret's voice, frail but imbued with an undeniable determination, filled my ear through the phone's tiny speaker. "Matt, if you're listening to this, it means I'm gone, and you're probably thinking about playing the martyr for the rest of your life." Even in death, she knew me, truly knew me, better than anyone. "I need you to know some things about Caroline, things I couldn't say while I was alive because I kept hoping she'd grow out of it." I closed my eyes, a wave of profound sorrow washing over me, as I listened to my dead wife's chilling confession. "She's become cruel, Matt. Not just selfish, cruel. Last week, when the nurse was helping me to the bathroom, Caroline asked when I was finally going to die so you could get back to normal life. Those were her exact words." The words struck me like ice water, a freezing cascade directly into my soul. She told me she was embarrassed to bring friends around because of how pathetic you'd become. She said she wished she'd been born into a different family, a successful family. Margaret's voice, though still weak, grew stronger, imbued with a fresh urgency. I heard her on the phone with that sterling boy, Matt. She was laughing about how her working-class father would never fit into their world. She said she was grateful she'd inherited her intelligence from my side of the family because your genes were clearly limited. I had to pause the recording, my hands shaking uncontrollably, the rage and sorrow a toxic cocktail within me. When I pressed play again, Margaret was openly weeping, her raw emotion tearing at my heart. "I'm scared, Matt. Not of dying, but of what she's becoming. Promise me you won't enable this behavior with money after I'm gone. Promise me you'll make her earn her character the hard way." Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper, thick with tears. "And if she ever dishonors my memory to make herself look better, if she ever uses my death as an excuse to hurt you, then you have my permission to tell her exactly what I thought about the woman she was becoming." The recording ended with a precise timestamp, January 12th, 2016, 11:47 p.m., just 3 days before she drew her last breath. I stood there in that quiet corner for what felt like an eternity, 5 agonizing minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the wedding reception continuing behind me. Caroline's carefree laughter occasionally carried over the music, a jarring counterpoint to Margaret's anguished words. The Sterling family, no doubt, was still holding court at their tables, probably still dissecting my daughter's inspirational speech about transcending her supposedly meager circumstances. For 8 years, I had honored Margaret's wishes with unwavering devotion. I had allowed Caroline to struggle, to believe we were broke, to build what I had desperately hoped would be character forged through adversity. Instead, she had cultivated resentment, and tonight she had irrevocably crossed the line Margaret had so specifically warned me about. She had, in the most egregious manner imaginable, dishonored her mother's memory for the shallow gratification of social approval. The hour of reckoning. I walked back into the reception hall, the noise and laughter now feeling alien, hostile. I moved purposefully past the dance floor where Caroline was gracefully spinning in her $15,000 dress, past the Sterling family table where they were likely already planning her seamless integration into their exclusive social circle. I returned to table 12 and, instead of sitting down, pulled out my own phone. Not Margaret's phone, but my own Samsung Galaxy. I opened the Chase Bank app, its screen displaying my current checking account balance, a staggering $33,187,432. Next, I navigated to my Wells Fargo app, revealing my investment portfolio, currently valued at $41,293,156. I had photos of my military commendations, including the prestigious Defense Superior Service Medal I had received for my work on the Pentagon Cyber Project. I also held screenshots of the property deed, irrefutably proving my sole ownership of the very 12-bedroom Sterling family estate in Greenwich. I had acquired it back in 2009 from a bankruptcy auction for a mere $3.2 million. The Sterlings had, for years, been renting it from me for a symbolic $1 per year, an arrangement I had charitably set up to help them save face after their ancestral railroad fortune had spectacularly collapsed. I had meticulous email records documenting every single anonymous payment I had made toward Caroline's student loans, credit cards, and rent over the past 8 years, a total of $247,000 in quiet, unseen assistance. And, most critically, I possessed Margaret's voice recording, time-stamped and securely saved to the cloud, complete with her explicit, undeniable permission to reveal the truth if Caroline ever dared to cross this exact, unforgivable line. Suddenly, the DJ's voice boomed over the sound system, announcing that the father of the bride had requested to make a speech. I hadn't requested anything, but I stood up anyway, a man making a choice, because some promises, especially those made to the dead, hold far greater weight and importance than the fleeting desire to keep peace with the living. I didn't walk directly to that microphone, no. That would have been sloppy, emotional, the kind of rash mistake that allows your target to escape with their dignity, however undeserved, still intact. Instead, I veered towards the bar. "Excuse me," I said calmly to the bartender, my voice even. "Could I borrow your phone charger? I need to make sure my phone doesn't die during the speeches." He handed me a portable battery pack. I plugged in both phones, Margaret's rose gold iPhone and my Samsung Galaxy, ensuring both were fully charged and ready. While they powered up, I opened my email app and forwarded myself a very specific message, something I had received just that morning from my accountant, confirming the final irreversible details of a decision I had been contemplating for months. Then, I opened my photos and meticulously created a new album. I selected 23 images I had never shown anyone. Bank statements dating back to 2016, property deeds explicitly listing my name as the sole owner, screenshots of every anonymous payment I had ever made to Caroline's accounts, certificates of my military commendations, and the Pentagon contractor identification card I had carried for 15 years. And there was one more crucial thing. I opened my voice recorder app and started a new recording, just in case anyone later dared to claim I had lost my mind or uttered words I didn't truly mean. This is Matt Thompson speaking. Today is September 23rd, 2024. The time is 8:47 p.m. I am of sound mind and clear judgment. What I'm about to do, I do with full knowledge of the consequences, in accordance with my late wife's explicit wishes, and in response to my daughter's public dishonoring of her mother's memory. I stopped the recording and saved it with its precise timestamp. The DJ was now introducing the best man, Reginald's Princeton roommate, who was regaling the crowd with charming, if slightly boorish, stories about bachelor parties in Cabo and exorbitant investment banking bonuses. I utilized those 10 minutes to meticulously arrange my evidence in the exact, calculated order I intended to present it. First, Margaret's voice recording queued up to the most damaging, undeniable parts. Second, my Chase Bank statement screenshot, carefully cropped to display only the account balance and today's date. Third, the property deed unequivocally proving my ownership of the Sterling estate with the $1 per year rental agreement clearly attached. Fourth, a detailed spreadsheet I had created years ago tracking every single dollar I had anonymously, given Caroline since her mother's death. Fifth, my military commendations and Pentagon contractor credentials, undeniable proof of my professional caliber. Sixth, the email I had forwarded myself that morning from my estate attorney confirming the changes to my will that would take immediate effect upon my verbal authorization. By the time the best man concluded his speech, I had everything perfectly arranged. 2 phones, fully charged, evidence meticulously sorted, and Margaret's voice recording ready to shatter the illusion through the venue's powerful sound system. The DJ, beaming, called for the father of the bride. "Actually," I heard Caroline's voice, laced with dismissive amusement, cut in over the microphone, "my father is a little shy about public speaking. He probably won't want to say anything." Nervous laughter rippled from the Sterling tables. Sympathetic nods were exchanged by guests who assumed the broke, pathetic widower was simply too intimidated to address such a sophisticated crowd. I stood up. "No, Caroline," I said, my voice carrying with surprising clarity. "I think I do have something to say." The room, as if on cue, fell utterly silent. 180 people turned as one, their gazes fixed on the man in the $200 suit, now walking purposefully toward the microphone. Caroline's face went instantly pale. For a fleeting moment, she looked like the little girl who used to apologize when she broke something valuable. But it was far, far too late for apologies. I reached the podium, connecting Margaret's phone to the venue's sound system via the auxiliary cable, and looked out at the expectant crowd. At the Sterling family, resplendent in their designer clothes. At Caroline, radiant in her $15,000 dress. At all the people who had just applauded her speech about rising above her pathetic father's perceived limitations. The wedding reception was about to become an impromptu public courtroom. The truth unleashed. "Good evening, everyone." My voice resonated clearly through the room, perfectly amplified by the microphone. Every single person in that reception hall could hear me. Every word, every nuance. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Caroline and Reginald's wedding. It's been educational." A few polite, uncertain chuckles broke the tension. Caroline was gripping her champagne flute so tightly I genuinely feared it might shatter in her hand. "You know, I've been sitting at table 12 tonight listening to all the speeches," I continued, allowing my gaze to sweep across the opulent room. "Hearing about success and accomplishment, about rising above your circumstances and joining families with real breeding and class." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle, and looked directly at Whitman Sterling Jr., whose confident smirk had begun to falter. It got me thinking about my late wife, Margaret, about what she would have thought of tonight's festivities. Caroline's eyes were now darting frantically between me and the exit doors, a desperate search for escape. Reginald had his hand on her shoulder, but he looked utterly confused, as if he couldn't quite fathom why his new father-in-law suddenly exuded such an unnerving calm and unwavering confidence. "Margaret was a truly wonderful woman," I stated, my voice softening slightly. "A kindergarten teacher who touched hundreds of young lives during her 28 years in the classroom. She died 8 years ago after a long, courageous battle with cancer." Sympathetic murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded respectfully, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Now, during Margaret's illness, we spent absolutely everything we had trying to save her life, every single penny. Caroline watched me write check after check to doctors and hospitals. She saw our savings seemingly disappear. She witnessed what she believed was her father spending himself into complete poverty for love. I looked at Caroline again, her face now completely white, stripped of all color. And after Margaret died, Caroline believed her father was broke. Finished. A pathetic failure who'd gambled everything on treatments that ultimately didn't work. More nods of sympathy. People were genuinely feeling sorry for me now, the grieving widower who had lost everything. For 8 years, I let her believe that story, I confessed, my voice still calm, controlled. I let her think I was struggling financially, that I was living in a small apartment, driving an old car, shopping at discount stores because I had no choice. Whitman Sterling Jr. was listening intently now, his expression etched with a dawning realization that this was not at all unfolding as he had anticipated. I let Caroline believe she was dating above her station when she met Reginald, I stated, the quiet irony clear in my tone, that she was incredibly lucky to be accepted into a family with real money and real class. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out both phones, holding them up for all to see. But before I continue, I think you should all hear something. A voice recording that Margaret made just 3 days before she died. Something she specifically asked me to share if certain circumstances ever arose. Caroline stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "Dad, maybe we should sit down," she pleaded, her voice a desperate whisper. "Caroline," my voice had changed, still calm, but now with an undeniable razor-sharp edge that made her freeze instantly. "You just gave a beautiful speech about your mother dying ashamed of the man she married, about how grateful you are to have found a real father figure in Whitman, about leaving the past behind." I held up Margaret's phone. "I think it's only fair that everyone hears what your mother actually said about you in her final days." The room was now utterly, eerily silent. You could have heard a pin drop, the tension thick and suffocating. This recording is timestamped January 12, 2016. 3 days before Margaret Thompson died. She made it specifically for this very moment. Caroline's mouth was moving, but no sound, no words were coming out, just a silent gasp. "After you hear your mother's actual words about the daughter she was leaving behind," I continued, my voice unwavering, "I have a few other things to share with you all. Things about success and accomplishment, about class and breeding, about exactly who has been rising above their circumstances." I pressed play on the recording. Margaret's weak but determined voice, amplified by the sound system, filled the reception hall. "Matt, if you're listening to this, it means I'm gone, and Caroline has probably crossed the line I warned you about." 180 people went completely silent, their eyes wide with disbelief and anticipation. The nuclear option had just gone live. Margaret's voice continued through the speakers, clear and unmistakable. "She's become cruel, Matt. Not just selfish, cruel. Last week, when the nurse was helping me to the bathroom, Caroline asked when I was finally going to die so you could get back to normal life. Those were her exact words." Gasps erupted from around the room, a collective shock. Caroline's face went from white to a ghastly green. "She told me she was embarrassed to bring friends around because of how pathetic you'd become. She said she wished she'd been born into a different family, a successful family." Several wedding guests turned their heads, openly staring at Caroline, their expressions a mixture of horror and judgment. Reginald's grip on her shoulder visibly tightened, his own face a mask of dawning alarm. Margaret's voice grew stronger on the recording, her righteous indignation piercing through her weakness. "I heard her on the phone with that Sterling boy, Matt. She was laughing about how her working-class father would never fit into their world. She said she was grateful she'd inherited her intelligence from my side of the family because your genes were clearly limited." Whitman Sterling Jr.'s face darkened, a thunderous expression replacing his earlier confusion. He was staring at Caroline now, not at me, his gaze filled with a profound sense of betrayal. "I'm scared, Matt. Not of dying, but of what she's becoming. Promise me you won't enable this behavior with money after I'm gone. Promise me you'll make her earn her character the hard way." The recording paused, its final words hanging in the air. I looked out at 180 silent, stunned faces. "That was your mother's dying wish, Caroline," I said, my voice resonating with a quiet power. "That I not spoil you with money, that I let you build character through struggle." I held up my phone now, showing the screen to the entire room, the bright numbers a shocking contrast to the dimming light of Caroline's world. "For 8 years, I honored that wish. I let you believe we were broke. I watched you work for everything. I desperately hoped you'd develop empathy, humility, the qualities your mother valued above all else." Caroline tried to speak, her voice a choked whisper. "Dad, I'm not finished. I cut through her attempt like a blade, my voice hardening. Instead, you became exactly what your mother feared. Someone who values superficial wealth over genuine character. Someone who would dishonor the sacred memory of the dead for fleeting social approval. I opened my Chase Bank app and held the phone up high enough for the front tables to see. The glowing screen, a beacon of undeniable truth. So, let me share a few facts with everyone here tonight. Facts about real success and true accomplishment. I read directly from the screen, my voice clear and authoritative. My current checking account balance is $33,187,432. The silence in the room was absolute, profound. No one even dared to breathe. My investment portfolio, expertly managed by Goldman Sachs, is worth $41,293,000. Whitman Sterling Jr. was gripping his wine glass so hard his knuckles were bone white, his face contorted in disbelief. I pulled a crisply printed document from my jacket. This is my military service record. I held top-secret clearance for 15 years as a Pentagon contractor, specializing in cutting-edge cyber defense systems. The project I completed in 2019 was, in fact, the largest single contractor award in military history, valued at $47.5 million. Several people at the Sterling family table were now staring fixedly at their plates, their faces etched with a mortified comprehension. But my favorite document is this one. I held up another paper, its edges sharp and uncreased. This is the property deed for the estate at 247 Meadowbrook Lane in Greenwich, Connecticut. Some of you might recognize that address. Whitman Sterling Jr. went completely, utterly pale, his jaw slack with shock. It's the Sterling family's ancestral home, the 12-bedroom mansion where they've proudly lived for 4 generations. Except they don't own it. I looked directly at Whitman, my gaze unwavering. I do. I bought it in 2009 when your railroad fortune collapsed and you faced utter bankruptcy. You've been renting it from me for $1 per year under a charitable arrangement specifically designed to help you save face. Patricia Sterling made a choking sound, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. The property is currently valued at $8.2 million. The taxes, which I pay, are $63,000 annually. The maintenance, which I also cover, runs about $40,000 per year. I turned back to Caroline, whose tears were now freely flowing, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivers. Would you like to know what else I've been paying for? She could only shake her head, her sobs racking her body. I pulled out my phone again and opened a meticulously compiled spreadsheet. Your student loan payments. Anonymous cashier's checks totaling $87,000 over 6 years. Your credit card payments when you maxed them out, $43,000. Your apartment security deposits and rent assistance, $91,000. Your car payments, insurance, and maintenance for that BMW X5 you drive, $26,000. Total anonymous financial assistance to Caroline Thompson over 8 years, $247,000. The numbers hung in the air, cold, stark, irrefutable accusations. Every month, I watched you struggle just enough to think you were earning your way. Every month, I made sure you never actually failed. And every single month, I hoped you developed the character your mother wanted you to have. I paused, allowing the gravity of my words to sink into every corner of the room. Instead, you stood at this podium tonight and told 180 people that your mother died ashamed of me, that I was a pathetic failure who never amounted to anything. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but the microphone carried every devastating word with crystalline clarity. Your mother didn't die ashamed of me, Caroline. She died worried about you. Caroline was sobbing openly now, a raw, primal sound. Reginald looked as though he wished the floor would simply swallow him whole, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out one final document, crisp and official. This morning, I met with my estate attorney. This is a revised will, fully executed and notarized as of 3:30 p.m. today. I held the document up for everyone to see, its legal weight undeniable. My previous will left everything to Caroline. My houses, my investments, my military pension, absolutely everything, approximately $74 million. Caroline looked up through her tears, a flicker of desperate hope momentarily igniting in her eyes. My new will leaves Caroline exactly $1, I stated, the finality in my voice crushing that hope instantly. The same amount her in-laws pay in rent for my house. The rest goes to the American Cancer Society, in memory of Margaret Thompson, a woman who valued character over superficial wealth and genuine kindness over empty class. I folded the will and carefully returned it to my jacket pocket. The changes take effect immediately upon my verbal authorization, which I'm giving right now in front of all these witnesses. I looked at Caroline one last time, a profound sadness mingling with my resolve. Congratulations on your wedding, sweetheart. You finally got what you always wanted, a family with real money and real class. I gestured subtly toward the Sterling table where Whitman Jr. was staring at his wine glass as if it contained a deadly poison. Of course, now that you know who actually owns their house, things might be a little awkward at Thanksgiving. I disconnected Margaret's phone from the sound system, picking up both devices. Enjoy the rest of your reception, everyone. The bar's already paid for. I turned and walked away from the microphone, leaving my daughter's carefully constructed new life in absolute ruins behind me. The aftermath begins. I had made it exactly 15 feet from the microphone before the chaos erupted. Caroline's scream, shrill and utterly devoid of control, sliced through the stunned silence like a jagged knife. It wasn't a sob or a cry. It was a full-throated primal scream of pure anguish that made fully half the room flinch involuntarily. "You can't do this. You can't just destroy my life." She was on her feet now, her $15,000 Vera Wang dress, once pristine, now wrinkled from where she had gripped the fabric, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black, glistening rivers. 30 years. 30 years I've been your daughter, and you destroy me in front of everyone." I turned back toward her, my voice remaining unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to her raw fury. 8 years, Caroline. 8 years you let me believe your mother died ashamed of me." "I never said that," she shrieked, her voice cracking. I pulled out Margaret's phone again, holding it up. "Would you like me to play the recording again? I have the exact timestamp where your mother quotes your words about her dying ashamed." Caroline's mouth opened and closed, soundless, like a fish gasping for air. That's when Reginald finally found his voice, a strangled, furious sound. "Now wait just a minute." He stood up abruptly, his face flushed crimson with a potent cocktail of rage and profound embarrassment, or perhaps both. "You can't come to our wedding and humiliate my wife with some fabricated recording." Fabricated? I calmly opened the voice recording app on my own phone and showed him the timestamp and file properties. January 12th, 2016, 11:47 p.m., original iPhone audio file, never edited. I can provide the digital signature and metadata to any forensics expert you'd like to hire, Reginald. Reginald's father, Whitman Sterling Jr., finally rose to his feet, his hands visibly shaking, his composure utterly shattered. "The property deed? That has to be forged. Our family has owned that estate since 1924. I pulled out my phone once more and opened the Connecticut Property Records app. "Would you like me to show everyone the public records, Whitman?" Property transfers are public information. Your bankruptcy filing in 2009 is also public record. Should I pull that up too? His face drained of all color, going from an angry red to an ashen gray in mere seconds. "You son of a," he whispered, his voice laced with venom. "Actually, my mother was a saint, unlike some people in this room." That's when Patricia Sterling, Whitman's wife, burst into gut-wrenching sobs. Not quiet tears, but body-shaking wails that drew every eye in the room. 40 years, she wailed, her voice thick with anguish. 40 years we've been telling everyone about our family estate, our heritage, our legacy." She looked around desperately at the other society families, most of whom were now staring intently at their phones, undoubtedly Googling the property records to verify my claims. "We're ruined, completely ruined." Meanwhile, Caroline had found her second wind, her fury reignited. "All those anonymous payments. You were spying on me, stalking my finances." "I was helping you, Caroline," I corrected, my voice unwavering, "every month for 8 years." "I didn't ask for your help." "No," I agreed, a faint bitter smile touching my lips. "You just cashed the checks." Several wedding guests were now openly taking photos and videos with their phones, a frantic digital feeding frenzy. I could clearly see at least 6 people live streaming the entire dramatic spectacle to Instagram and TikTok. One of Reginald's groomsmen, a hedge fund analyst named Brandon, was the first to break ranks, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Dude, your father-in-law owns your house. That's actually hilarious." "Shut up, Brandon," Reginald snarled, his face contorted with impotent rage. "No, seriously," Brandon insisted, his phone still recording everything. "This is like a Netflix documentary in real time. The broke dad who's secretly richer than all of us combined." Brandon held up his phone, capturing every single moment. "This is going to be everywhere by midnight." That's when I noticed something profoundly interesting unfolding at the other tables. The non-Sterling guests, the people who weren't part of the old money crowd, the ones who had watched Caroline's performance with discomfort, were starting to smile. A woman at table 6, an elegant stranger, stood up and began to clap slowly, deliberately. Then table 3 joined in, a ripple effect spreading through the room. Within 30 seconds, about half the reception hall was applauding, the half that wasn't related to either family and had just witnessed the ultimate underdog victory. The Sterling family members looked utterly mortified, their faces a mixture of shock and profound humiliation. Their friends from the yacht club and country club were frantically texting, probably trying to figure out how quickly they could distance themselves from this unprecedented social catastrophe. Caroline noticed the applause and completely lost what little was left of her composure. "Stop clapping! This isn't funny. He just destroyed my entire family." She turned to me, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I hope you're happy, Dad. I hope this was worth it." "It was, Caroline," I replied, my voice still calm, still controlled, utterly unyielding. "Your mother made me promise to set boundaries if you ever crossed certain lines. Tonight, you crossed the biggest one." "What line?" she demanded, her voice raw, using her memory as a weapon against the man who loved her most. That, finally, silenced her. Reginald was now frantically on his phone, probably calling lawyers or financial advisors, or both. Whitman Sterling Jr. had collapsed back into his chair, staring blankly at nothing, his world in tatters. Patricia Sterling was still weeping inconsolably into her napkin. The DJ, clearly out of his depth with this extraordinary situation, made the ill-advised mistake of asking if anyone wanted to request a song. Brandon, the irreverent hedge fund groomsman, shouted out, "Play Money Can't Buy Me Love" by the Beatles. Half the room roared with laughter. Caroline screamed again, a raw, animalistic sound. I decided it was time to leave. I walked toward the exit, passing tables filled with people who were either applauding, filming, or sitting in stunned, open-mouthed silence. As I reached the door, Caroline's voice, hoarse but still carrying a thread of defiant fury, rang out one last time. "Don't you dare walk away from me! We're not done!" I turned back and looked at her across the reception hall, my daughter in her beautiful, now soiled wedding dress, surrounded by the irreparable wreckage of her new family's reputation, a monument to her own choices. "Yes, Caroline," I said, my voice firm and final. "We are." And I walked out into the cool Connecticut night, leaving behind 8 years of agonizing silence and 33 years of fatherhood, a profound and brutal ending. The irreversible choice. I thought I was done. I genuinely believed that walking out of that reception hall was the definitive end of it all. I was wrong. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang, its illuminated screen displaying Caroline's name. "Dad, please, we need to talk." Her voice was entirely different now, smaller, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. It held a vulnerability, a fragility, that sounded almost like the little girl I had raised. "There's nothing left to talk about, Caroline. Please, just 5 minutes. I'm in the parking lot of your condo complex." I looked out my window. Sure enough, there it was, a sleek black BMW X5, parked conspicuously under the streetlight, the very car I had been discreetly making payments on for 3 years. Against every fiber of my better judgment, I went downstairs. Caroline was leaning against the car, still in her wedding dress. Her makeup was gone, streaked and smudged, her elaborate hairstyle now a tangled mess, and she looked as though she had aged 10 years in a mere 3 hours. "The reception ended at 9:45, she said, her voice hollow, not looking at me. "Half the guests left after your speech. The other half stayed to film the Sterling family meltdown." I didn't respond, merely waited. "Reginald's parents are talking about an annulment," she continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "They're saying I committed fraud by not disclosing my family's true financial status. Like being rich is something you have to warn people about." She managed a bitter, humorless laugh. "You want to know the really funny part? Reginald is more angry about the money than the humiliation. He spent 2 years telling his friends he was marrying down for love. Turns out he was marrying up the whole time." "Caroline, no. Let me finish." She finally looked at me, and in her eyes, for the first time in 8 years, I saw a flicker of Margaret. "I listened to Mom's recording again. Reginald filmed your whole speech on his phone. I've watched it 6 times now." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a childish gesture. She was right about me, wasn't she? About what I was becoming. For a fleeting moment, I felt a resurgence of hope. Perhaps this was the breakthrough Margaret had so desperately desired. Perhaps losing absolutely everything would finally teach Caroline the profound lessons that superficial wealth could not. But then her expression hardened, the vulnerability receding. "But that doesn't make what you did tonight okay. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You destroyed my marriage before it even started. You made me look like a fool." "You made yourself look like a fool, Caroline," I corrected, my voice still calm, unyielding. "I just provided the evidence. Evidence you gathered by lying to me for 8 years. Her voice was rising again, the old anger creeping back in. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my career, to my social life? By tomorrow morning, everyone in Greenwich is going to know that Caroline Thompson's father owns the Sterling estate, that everything I've built for myself was funded by anonymous daddy money." Maybe that's something you should have considered before you gave that speech.
I was like,